What's up? It's Way Up with Angela Yee, and it's time for our Wealth Wednesday. I'm excited.
I'm very excited.
Stacey Tisdale is here with me, of course.
I'm very excited. Again, happy Wealth Wednesdays, everybody. And we are super excited. It is a crazy, uncertain time. We were just talking about that. Nobody knows what to do, where to put their money. But there's one thing that you all must know. It's more important than ever that your money does work for you and go to work. Pulling out all levers. And we're going to talk today about investing in something that you might think is well beyond your reach. We're going to talk about investing in art with a legend.
Yes, indeed.
In the Black art space, Richard Beavers, who is the founder of the Richard Beavers Art Gallery, which you're going to tell us all about. But let's start at the very beginning. Your art journey started when you were in middle school. What happened?
Yes, it did. First and foremost, I want to thank you for having me here today, Angela and Stacey. This is amazing.
It's a blessing
Really
to have
looking
you.
forward to this conversation. It started out for me rather early. I was in my early teens, and I went on a class trip to the museum. Came home from that trip, and my mother asked me, what did I think? And at the time, I couldn't really articulate it, but I said to her, I didn't really think too much of it.
Right.
And she said, well, did you see art? And I said, yeah, I did see art. But what happened is that I didn't see anything that was reflective of who I was, and it didn't speak to my personal experiences or anything culturally. So my mother took me to a gallery that was in the city. It was on 13th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, and it was owned by two black women from the Caribbean. And the name of the gallery was Sabaco Gallery. And that was the first time I ever walked into a space and I just saw all black art.
Yeah, it's so important to have art that you feel connected to, because I always tell people when we go, I was at the Whitney the other day, and I was with two of my friends, and they were like, well, how do you know, like, what's good art? And I'm like, what's good art is subjective to like what you are looking at and what you feel like it speaks to you. Certain things you'll look at, it's like, okay, but then you'll look at something and you'll be like, wow, you just feel some type of emotion that connects you to it.
Yeah, it's a spiritual, it's emotional, personal connection. And it's important for us to see imagery that's reflective of who we are and to talk about our culture and our experiences. Art is uplifting, it's inspirational, it's empowering. It's very important in all aspects. And for me, going to the Sabaco Gallery, it was really transformational for me. It changed my complete outlook on art. And when it came to art, and I spent a lot of time in that gallery, and that was really the beginning for me.
That's dope. I took art too when I was younger, and I took it when I was in college. I took this art class, and I definitely was not connected at all to what it was that we were seeing. I was like half asleep in my art class all the time. But I wanted to, because you sometimes feel like you're not, like it makes you feel like you're not cultured or something. If you look at something and people are like, yeah, he splatters the paint and does this and the way, and you're like, I don't get it.
Well, no, it's funny when I look at art, especially art I love, I connect with the artist and their story, and I know that really happened for you in a big way. Leroy Campbell.
Yeah, so Leroy Campbell, whom I work with today, he's a mentor of mine, but I went to his solo show. It was in the Village, and I walked into, well, let me backtrack. So in Sabaco Gallery, the very first piece that I saw was a man sitting on a brownstone step, and he was playing the saxophone. As a child, obviously growing up in Brooklyn and Harlem, brownstones. So that was a connection right there. Then I also wanted to play the saxophone as a kid. So when I saw this man sitting on a stoop in this painting playing the saxophone, that was another connection for me. And then obviously him being a black man. So it was three elements within that painting, and that painting was created by an artist. His name is Leroy Campbell. And that name continues to come up, throughout different periods, well, really pivotal periods in my life. So moving fast forward, I went to a exhibition in the city, and it was a Leroy Campbell show. And I walked in, saw a piece that I liked. It was the first piece that I ever purchased, and I reconnected with Leroy. And from there, at that time, I was working at MTV Networks. Leroy offered me an opportunity to come and work with him. So him and I began traveling around the country. I would assist him in doing shows together. So even though I was working at MTV, I would use my vacation days, my personal days, and my sick days to just travel with him and to continue to pursue my interest in art. I didn't know where it was going to go, but I knew that, I had this gut feeling, this instinctual thing that this was a space or a place that I was supposed to be at that particular time.
Now, you also have a gallery in Brooklyn and Bed-Stuy, and I met you on the street over by where iHeart used to be, downtown. And so he was like, I'm Richard Beavers. I'm like, wait a minute. I walk past your gallery all the time right near my house. And it is, and you've said this before, that it can be intimidating for people to see that, like in our neighborhood, to want to go in there. You feel like, am I supposed to, how do I do this? So can we talk about you opening a gallery in Bed-Stuy and why that was important to you?
First and foremost, it was important because that 13-year-old kid who lives in the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood, that's me, and I know that there were a lot of young people that came from my community that I grew up in, which was East Flatbush, and they didn't get the access. They didn't be able to go to galleries the way that I was able to. I was very fortunate to have had a mother who had that foresight, and she understood the importance of exposing me to different things just to see what would stick with me and how valuable that would be to me, further down the road in my life. But for the young people who were my peers, they didn't get opportunities to go to galleries. And I always think to myself, like, what impact could it have made on them? I come from a neighborhood where there was just so much brilliance, as we know, but a lot of times that brilliance is suppressed and they're not given access and visibility to certain things. So it was really important for me when I made a decision to open a gallery that I wanted to bring it to my community, which was an underserved community when it came to the arts. But most importantly, I wanted young people to have access and exposure to art, young people of color.
And you've had that gallery for 18 years now.
Sheesh.
I mean, think about that, because I feel like now people
Anything for 18 years.
I know, right? That
wow.
existed for 18 years.
Wow.
18 years of my age, when I think about it. Yeah.
But I also, just even thinking about that, and like Stacey said, to her point, because Bed-Stuy, there's a lot of things, in general, a lot of things are closing. And so for somebody who's like, because I do feel like art is more of a conversation now than it's ever been, and which is a great and positive thing, right? So for somebody that is like, okay, well, how do you monetize that? How is it that you're able to have a space, but also pay the rent, pay whatever overhead that it is that you have to pay? How does that work for what it is that you do?
Yeah, that's an entrepreneur question.
Yeah, so you have to be resourceful, and I've been able to sustain it, and not only just sustain it, but be able to scale it. Over the 17 years. When I first started, I was, in Union Square selling posters in 2005 for $5 and $10. And then in 2007, I opened a gallery. And I didn't know a lot about the business of art, but I've always been like a natural-born entrepreneur. I'm an avid reader, so I did a lot of reading on the industry. I went out and I visited like the top galleries, the ones that really spoke to me from a presentational standpoint, the type of art that they carried. So I found my niche, and my niche was I wanted to represent artists whose work was speaking to my community, the things that we see on a daily basis that take place, just everyday life within our community, which I was not seeing being represented in art, on the level that I felt that it should have been. So very early I created a niche for myself. I identified artists that were underrepresented or in many instances just overlooked by a lot of the mainstream galleries, and that became the path that I wanted to go down. And then there was a huge educational component to it too, and educating people about the importance of art and that you can collect art. It's not just for wealthy people. It is a place and space that you can feel welcome to come into.
Two things we really want to talk about is the artist, like how you pick and develop artists, and obviously for our audience, investing in art. How does someone with modest or low income even think about it? Because it's like Angela was just saying, people think, oh, it's for the wealthy, or I feel uncomfortable in here. How does somebody...
And on a personal level, your first piece that you bought from Leroy Campbell, how much did you spend on that?
At the time, I believe it was somewhere between $400 to $600.
And how much would you think it's valued at now?
Now, in about $15,000, $20,000.
I mean, imagine that.
Range. Yeah.
$400 to $600, valued at $15,000. Okay, we'll back up. How does somebody with modest income,
just
even
so
like
people know, it is an investment,
$500 or something, get involved in art?
So, at a $500 price point is more so an emerging artist, and an emerging artist who doesn't have a developed market, hasn't really sold a lot of their work, and that tends to be kind of like it started off with my sweet spot, where I would identify artists that I believe had a really, had a skill set, that the work spoke to me, and I worked with those artists, and I began to build a market out for them. And when I say build a market out for them, I give them mentorship, I give them access to be able to display their work in the gallery, but it's also in who the work is placed with. You know, I have a really strong collector base, so I make certain that I sell the work not just to people that are well-to-do off, but I look for people in the community that will become advocates for these artists. Because the most important thing is a lot of times people purchase art, but they just hang it on their home, on their walls. They don't go out, they don't talk to their network, they don't bring more visibility to the artists and introduce them to other collectors. And that is a very important aspect of it, is to bring as much visibility as you possibly can to that artist.
I was with a friend of mine who's a creative director at Major Gallery, and he took me to see a show. And then I was like, oh, I want to buy that. He's like, even if you had the money, you wouldn't be allowed to buy that. And I was like, why? He's like, because what you're doing for an artist is that artist only wants me to sell it to a collector that he knows is going to bring him other collectors, like how carefully people, the audience is curated for the artist. And that's one of the reasons when people would buy art with you for like a couple $100s or something, you really know how to create that market for the artist.
Yeah, so a lot of it is artist development, but what I make certain that I do is I want to see to it that the work is not just made available to board members and trustees at museums, and that's what your friend was talking about. These are kind of like tastemakers, very influential, prominent collectors. You know, if a person sits as a trustee on a museum, they have access. They spend money at these museums, so they're able to advocate for an artist. If an artist is in their collection, then they can recommend that artist become a part of a permanent collection of that institution, of a board that they sit on. So that's why board members and trustees at institutions are really important. You know, or if there's a collector who has a residency program. You know, residencies are really important for artists because residencies are typically ran by very high net worth individuals that are also art collectors.
Right.
You know, so they now introduce that artist to their network, and because that artist has a residency at a very well-known residency art program, now other collectors, they're on their radar, and then other collectors that follow behind kind of like these trends, now they're interested in acquiring the work.
So that's how the art appreciates, and what you can help, like someone in our audience, do is I'm going to help you with. You can explain. You can buy a gallery edition for a couple $100s because I know how I'm going to develop this artist, and then that that's a piece of art is going to be worth a lot. And one thing you told me when we were conversating that blew my mind is your art is an asset, so you can use it for things like credit and that type of thing. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the gallery editions Richard Beavers Gallery Editions is something that I launched a year ago. And I wanted to make certain that there was work available at a price point for collectors who can't come in at a $10,000 price point.
Right.
And what are those price points for gallery
Price
editions?
points for a gallery edition can be anywhere from $800 to $3,500.
Okay.
It just depends on the type of print. It depends on the edition size, and it also depends on the artist.
You can get a designer bag. You can get a
gallery edition, $800
piece of artwork that will be in your home.
Gucci bag,
for as long.
$3,000.
Yeah. For real, you really can. Okay.
And these are
My
assets.
bag's art, though.
That's a great gift, though, for someone to also gift you. Like, instead of somebody buying you a bag, how about you buy me a piece of art that's meaningful, that every time I look at it, I think of the person who gifted it to me.
Mm-hmm.
So gallery editions, how would somebody get access to that?
So gallery editions, they can come directly out to the gallery, or you can go on our website, which is richardbeaversgallery.com. And these editions are exclusively available through our gallery, and they're really small edition sizes. We keep the edition sizes in between, say, 20 to 30 in the edition. And we want them to sell out because as they begin to sell out with the demand, they increase in value.
Oh, it's like real estate.
Yeah, it's like real estate, yeah. I say a lot of times, we're in Bedford-Stuyvesant, but think about the real estate market in Bed-Stuy 15 years ago.
Tell me about it.
And people overlooking it because it's Bed-Stuy.
Right.
So it's the same thing with my gallery. A lot of times people look at the gallery, it's Richard Beavers Gallery, it's in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. I could be any place in the country that I choose to be, but my intentional aspect of it is I want to be in Bed-Stuy. And the artists that we've had that have come through the gallery as emerging artists are some of the most sought-after African-American artists that have gone on in the contemporary art market right now.
I mean, he had a Hebrew Brantley. I remember that. And I will say he did send me the price list. I was like, woo, okay, no, not today.
But we have payment plans.
Listen, I definitely was like, oh, I wish I could, get that. But I do think that's valuable. And as far as even people, I remember Mashonda has actually been really helpful to me, and she's been collecting art with emerging artists. And so now I got to make an appointment to come to the Richard Beavers Gallery.
I went
Yeah,
a couple
Mashonda's
weeks
a
ago.
phenomenal dealer.
Yeah.
And then to the
She's
financing
great at hooking me
aspect
up,
of it,
yeah.
like art financing. Do you want me to go over
Yeah,
that?
I
or-
wanted you to explain that people can actually leverage their art for loans.
Yes.
And credit.
Yeah. So I'll give you this as a real life story.
Okay.
In 2018, I was one of Nathaniel Mary Quinn's first dealers. So Nathaniel Mary Quinn is an artist who's gone on to be tremendously successful. He's represented by Gagosian, and Gagosian is one of the top 4 galleries. You have Gagosian, you have Hauser and Wirth, you have Pace, and there's one other, but there's
David
like top
Zerner's
and
good.
David Werner. There you
That's
go.
what my friend
Absolutely.
said.
Yes, and David Werner. So Quinn is with Gagosian now. Gagosian sells $1 billion worth of art. So in 2018, I'm working with Quinn. I'm not representation, but one of his first art dealers. And it had been like maybe 8 to 10 years since I left MTV. So I get a letter in the mail from MTV informing me that I have a pension that I did not know about.
Ooh.
So in this pension, they're saying that I have a certain amount of money in there, and they're moving providers of the pension, and I have a one-time opportunity to pull that money out penalty-free.
That's nice.
Yeah,
I want a letter
penalty-free.
like that.
Penalty-free.
I never get letters
Yeah.
like that.
So I say to myself, okay, I can leave it in there, and I can get 12% interest in the SP 500 index fund, over the next 10 years, or I can pull that money out and invest in 2 Nathaniel Mary Quinn works. So I made a decision to pull the money out, no penalty. I purchased 2 works from him, $25,000, and that was 8 years ago. Those works now are worth $450,000.
Sheesh. What a great purchase and great decision.
$450,000.
Okay, now tell someone how you can take the money that piece of art and also use it as an asset for a loan.
So now those 2 works, I can leverage them, and I can use them to get a loan, art financing. So you have Sotheby's, you have Christie's, you have J.P. Morgan, Bank of America. These are private banking, and I can leverage that and use that to secure a loan.
Just like a mortgage or something.
Yeah,
Right.
just like a mortgage, and you can get anywhere from the loan to value ratio is anywhere from 40 to 60%. It just depends on the artist. It depends on how diverse your collection is. How the work has sold in a primary market, secondary market, meaning resale at auction. And Quinn has a very strong, auction history of when it comes to reselling, and there's an extremely strong demand for his work. So I can get 40 to 60% loan to value ratio on that. And the interest would be depending on your credit worthiness. And in some instances, depending on the works, they may not even run a credit check.
Wow. That's
so
amazing.
Isn't that something? So
Yeah.
I can get a loan, and the interest would be anywhere from, say, 6 to 15%. But if it's a short-term loan, you're looking at 3 to 5% interest.
That's great. I don't know if I have
Against your
anything
piece of art.
valuable enough to.
That's what I was going to ask you about. How valuable does something have to be? Because I think a lot of people are still thinking, art, it has to be valuable, it has to be a lot of money. But you're talking about being able to enter this market for like $800.
Yeah. So when I purchased those the Quinn works, they were under $25,000. And I've had other artists that I have worked with early on. Bisa Butler is an artist.
Oh my gosh, I love Bisa Butler.
I know you do.
Listen, I told her, one day I'm getting it. But it's, as time goes by, it's getting more and more expensive. But her work is amazing.
But example, 6 years ago? Well, maybe 8 years ago, Bisa had a solo show at the Brooklyn Gallery.
Right.
And the most expensive work in that show was $6,000.
I would have been on that. Because even when you just look at the texture, it's the colors, like everything that she does is so beautiful. And so, she's one of my top people that I really enjoy her art.
That was the most expensive work?
That was the most expensive
Can
work.
you
in the
imagine?
What was
show.
the range there?
The range was $2,500 to $6,000.
Okay, so
and imagine what that's
$2,500
worth now.
Well,
to
she's one of
$6,000.
the, she's
Take
one of
us
the most
through her
sought
story.
after. She's one of the most sought after textile artists in the country right now.
So now what's the range of her
Now
art?
I believe works start off at $80,000, and that's if you can get one. That's only primary. And I know she has a wait list of at least a couple of years.
And that's what your gallery editions offer people the opportunity to do. Get something. You said you limit the amount.
Yeah, they're really small edition sizes. The edition sizes are 30, which means there's only 30 of those limited editions available of that image, and each one is signed, numbered, and dated by the artist, and it comes with a certificate of authenticity.
How would somebody know? Because, you have the foresight and the research and all of that, but say the average person is like, and somebody, one of my best friends told me, because she actually has a Kehinde Wiley that he did of her, that he actually was commissioned to do. So she has this huge, and she did this super early on. And even back then it was expensive, but I can't even imagine what it's worth right now. But how would somebody know that like this artist may not be, that yet, but they're going to blossom into this for the average person who doesn't have the insight that you have?
You call Richard.
You
Beavers.
call Richard
You
Beavers.
we have to,
He has
okay.
a whole lot
and I mean-
education community.
And even if it's not, well, I always say that Dr. Henry Louis Gates says the first key to community is the sharing of information, right? And that's another reason why I'm in Bed-Stuy, is as I began to learn the business of art, it is a place where wealthy people preserve their money. It's
Right.
an unregulated industry. So there's so many opportunities that exist out there. But what I do say is, first and foremost, you purchase what you love
Yeah.
and what you can afford. Then down the road, if the work appreciates in value and the artist goes on to have a tremendously successful career, then you benefit and you have something that you can leave to your heirs or to your children, and continue to pass on generational wealth. We work during the daytime, but we build wealth at night, and art is an excellent way to diversify your portfolio. You have real estate, you have stock, and then you have an art portfolio.
And that's what she said. She was like, are you planning to sell it? She was like, because if not, you're buying what you really want to have in your home. It's not like I'm over here, wheeling and dealing in art. I'm just buying things that I like, that I'm like, this is speaking to me.
And you can done
And like
wisely.
they can leverage
you
it.
can leverage it.
Yeah, so for me, and this is what I advise, unless you're a distressed seller, is that you don't sell your assets.
Yeah.
You leverage them. You can leverage your stock portfolio. You can refinance on your home. And now, you can, finance your art. It's currently right now in 2025, the art financing business is a $40 billion a year industry. And it's projected, I believe, over the next 10 years to be a $400 billion a year industry.
People leveraging that.
Yeah, and numbers are, astronomical. There's, statistics say there's over $2 trillion worth of art and collectibles in private collections. So it's an untapped industry.
How would somebody work with you?
Reach out to me. I'm always available.
Make an appointment.
Make an appointment.
Yeah.
Go to my website and, schedule an appointment to come in.
And then you could come to Cup right after. You could walk down the block, come to my coffee shop.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we can actually, we should do something like
We
that.
can, yeah.
Because a few weeks ago we had the art council, the Black Art Council for MoMA come out to the gallery.
Wow.
Now, wouldn't that have been nice if they come to the gallery and then we leave from the gallery and go to your coffee shop?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I would love that. And we're open at night now because we have.
Yeah.
I look
Okay,
at
you'll
And
be
once the
event
weather warms
planning.
up, we stay open late too.
We'll do a Wealth Wednesdays event there with that. But you have some upcoming events, correct?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Let us know.
We'll be in Chicago for Expo Chicago. That is April 24th to the 28th. We're going to be at the Expo Chicago Art Fair. Our booth is 118. And then while we're in Chicago, on the 23rd, I believe, I'm going to be at Soho House. I'm going to be
love
in
that Soho
conversation.
House.
Isn't it really nice?
I do.
I'm going to be in conversation with myself, Leroy Campbell, and Lynthia Edwards. And then on the 23rd, during the daytime, we're taking Family Photo Day to Chicago now.
Oh, so that's something that you've been doing in Brooklyn,
Yes.
where you actually are doing these family photos in the community for people, which I think is a beautiful give back. Because these are things that people will have forever, and those family photos, when you get some good ones, that is phenomenal. What made you think of that?
When I was a kid, it's just all of these experiences and things that I did with my mother. Every year we would have a family photo taken. Or you'll really connect to this, when we would go to 42nd Street on Easter.
Right.
We'd have on our
Just
flyers outfit, with the street photographers and the
Yes.
backdrops. So, this is my community.
Right.
These are the things
That's
that I was
beautiful.
exposed to. So And last year, we had Jamel Shabazz come out.
Wow.
Jamel Shabazz was one of the photographers. He donated, his time, and he took photographs of people from the community. We had Britt Sense as another documentarian street photographer. I mean, just a brilliant sister. She came all the way from San Francisco to participate. So
just imagine having that as your family photo that you can, and the story behind it. Because I think that's what it is when it comes to artwork and things that you have in your home. What is the story behind this?
Yeah, and how can we use art to make an impact in our community, to bring about change. We had there was one family that came out. It was an older couple. They had 4 children, and the wife came up to me and said that her husband had stage 4 cancer, and they had never had a family photo taken. And she felt that this was going to be the only opportunity, so she was so thankful. And that was the first family photo, professional family photo they ever had taken. So those are the stories that really resonate with me. And I've done extremely well in the business, but far more than anything is the impact that I can make in our community. And when it comes from a business standpoint, we should be the major stakeholders and decision makers when it comes to our cultural assets. So that means job creation from, art writers, curators, directors, salespeople. These jobs and opportunities are not being created in a lot of these galleries that exist outside of our community, but they sell Black art.
Right. You know what I want to ask you? Working with artists, of course, artists, their work is very precious to them, priceless to them even. How do you tell them what the price point should be? Because I have to imagine that is a back and forth.
It's not the easiest conversation, but one of the things that I say to artists, and it's not always received really well, is just that what would you pay for your art? If it wasn't you and you were purchasing the art, could you justify purchasing it for the amount of price that you want to put on it? And then when people have money for a reason, because they understand how to manage their money.
Right. And
they understand, what assets are. So you just have to be realistic. If you don't have a resale market, you start your prices off very moderately, because the worst thing you can do is come in too high with your prices.
Right.
Because you don't want to lower them. But you always have the opportunity to raise the prices as you develop your CV, as you begin to have a sales history. But first and foremost, the most important thing is to be able to sell the work. Not only does it help you to be able to reinvest back into your practice, but it's a good feeling and it gives you confidence.
Right.
And these early collectors are going to be the major advocates for you. So my thinking is early on you give people more for their money, and they'll always return back.
And what do you think about prints? Like, say somebody can't get an original piece of art, but they're like, okay, well, they do have these limited edition prints available for us to be able to purchase. Is that valuable?
Yeah, it depends. I don't know if they're valuable at $1,500 or $2,000 in an edition. But that's why I created Richard Beavers Gallery Editions, so that now we can make the limited editions and the prints available, but we can keep them at a really small edition size and give people opportunity to purchase something that will also appreciate and value over time.
And people can do that on your website?
They can do that on my website, yes.
Y'all can buy
or they can come into the gallery. I always want people to come into the gallery, because historically,
we got
galleries
people all
are
over the
intimidating.
country listening to this.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, go to the website.
Yeah.
Well, let me say this. When people travel from all different parts of the world, they come to Brooklyn. Like, we're on their list
Don't
of
play
to
with
do
us.
things. Yeah.
I am surrounded by Brooklynites
don't play with
here.
us. And now you can do virtual. Do you do virtual showings of your artwork if somebody wants to purchase, but say they're not going to make the trip?
Yeah, I have an OVR catalog that we can send to them.
Okay. Isn't that great, modern technology? Because that's kind of the wave.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
All right. So happy Wealth Wednesdays, everybody. And your to-do today is to go to richardbeaversgallery.com. And
let's make our appointment, because I've been wanting to do that, because I know during the week it's appointment only, and then it's open, right?
No, so now we're
it's
open
not?
when the weather warms up.
Okay. I'm coming by.
Yes, we're open Tuesday through Friday from 12 to 6 p.m.
Let's go
No,
next
Tuesday
week.
through Sunday from
Okay.
12 to 6 p.m.
We're coming. And
Please
then,
come.
I'm not
and
even
then we're
kidding.
going to bring everybody with us to Cup.
Yes. Then we walk over to Cup, and we should do some collaborations
I'm
together.
dead serious.
We are.
I'm
We're
all for it.
neighbors.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah,
That's what
we're
this is all
doing. Yeah,
about.
let's do it.
All right. Wealth Wednesdays taking y'all on an art tour.
Love this.